A boy wakes up in a completely dark place and thinks he's inside a nightmare. Confused, he notices a sliver of light appearing in a corner of that tight little room, revealing a forest outside during late afternoon. Then, a status panel appears on the screen and, with a female voice, tells the user that his name is Dragon Egg. Other than that, explanations about status and items will be provided by the skill Divine Voice, level 1, which will also notify him when he levels up. The dragon asks if this is a game, and the voice replies that Divine Voice cannot provide that kind of information at the first level. He asks who he's talking to and where he is, but the system repeats the same answer as before. Nervous, the dragon ends up moving the egg too much and falling from the top of the tree where it was, gaining the skill Fall Resistance. Besides losing HP, the dragon also obtains the title Clumsy. Living up to that title, the poor thing rolls downhill and almost falls into a lake. At the water's edge, he sees his reflection and gets scared when he confirms that he really is an egg. A very valid reason to panic. However, the system corrects him, explaining that he is actually a dragon egg, an F-rank creature that will give birth to a real dragon, but will die if it breaks too early. The egg has no power at all and almost no intelligence because its brain is still developing, and even though it may one day become a feared dragon, an egg is still considered a great gourmet appetizer, and adventurers usually eat one whenever they find it during expeditions, unless the mother is nearby, of course. Confused by all this talk about dragons and adventurers, the egg ends up rolling even further down a slope, raising his rolling level from 1 to 2. Speaking of development, the dragon realizes he's able to minimally control his rolling and, with some practice, starts making a few turns and adjusting his speed better. But he ends up falling from a huge height straight onto the ground, raising Fall Resistance and Clumsy from level 1 to level 2. His HP now drops to just 3 out of 5. And he fears dying like a nobody in this unfamiliar forest. After spending the night sleeping, he notices that his HP recovers with a good nap. Rested, he continues his rolling journey, very aware of how strange it is to be living through this. By the way, he wonders when this egg will hatch someday, and he'll become a real dragon, a terrifying creature, though he has no idea how he'll get there. At most, he imagines he's inside an RPG or something like that, where you need to evolve with experience points and so on, even though fighting enemies as an egg seems extremely difficult. Speaking of enemies, the almost dragon spots a bug in the forest and checks its status. It is a shadow worm, which literally has the title Egg Devourer. Not surprisingly, the monster turns toward the dragon egg and starts chasing him without thinking twice. The egg doesn't hesitate either and gets out of there as fast as he can. Truth be told, even though he worked a lot on his rolling yesterday, he figures he won't escape this one with that alone, so he manages to think of a strategy to defeat the creature, even under enormous pressure. Soon, when he gets near a cliff, the egg makes a maneuver to leave the worm at the edge, and then, managing to get behind it, he pushes the monster off. Even though he falls together with it, the worm's own body cushions the fall and doesn't damage the egg. Suddenly, the shadow worm lifts its body and emits a strange energy, making the egg think this is really the end. However, the insect ends up collapsing and dying for good. With that, the winner earns 12 experience points, and because of his new title, Wandering Egg, he also receives a bonus exp. Realizing that he truly evolves when defeating enemies, the egg concludes that he really is in an RPG. From this moment on, he is a level 5 dragon egg, reaching the maximum level needed for the next evolution phase. Thus, a development tree is shown to him, where 2 transformation options appear. Baby Dragon, Rank D. Little Dragon, Ranked D+. The Little Dragon is a dwarf race of dragon, capable of reaching a smaller maximum size than usual, and feared by adventurers because of its fire breath. The Baby Dragon, however, has very tender meat, considered a delicacy delicious when seasoned. This race isn't very good for combat because its fangs are too small, but its advantage is having the potential to grow and become various species of dragons in the future, even though most end up becoming prey for adventurers. After such an unappealing description of the baby dragon, the egg chooses to become a little dragon, since it seems like the safer option. But suddenly, 2 magical hands appear and touch his shell, saying that he should aim for the top and grow strong, because expectations for him are high. The system then warns that Divine Voice has risen to level 2. When the voice disappears, the egg reflects on what he just heard, and even though he felt safer becoming a little dragon, it's true that the baby dragon can evolve well if it survives. With that, his choice is made, and the egg hatches, giving life to his new race, Baby Dragon. From there, the system notifies him about his new level 1 title, Son of the Dragon King, where all resistance skills below level 5 receive a boost. Aside from that, he also gains abilities like Dragon Scale and Baby Breath. Checking his status window, his stats increased considerably, but it seems his HP and MP do not return to maximum after he evolves, which means he needs to sleep anyway to recover. Finally, the dragon thanks the Shadow Worm for providing that pile of experience points, but setting that aside, the little monster begins to feel a huge hunger the moment he lays eyes on the insect. It's true that the worm is grotesque, but the dragon's instincts speak louder, begging for the winged monster to devour its prey and regain strength for the next challenge. Since that's the case, even if he wasn't comfortable with it, the dragon dives into the worm and viciously feeds on his victim. After all, according to him, you can't grow without consuming protein. To be completely honest, the baby dragon slept just as his race claims, like a baby. When he wakes up on the trunk of a tree, for a moment he thinks he's going to look at his paws and see that, in reality, they're his human hands and he has returned to his previous life. However, no such thing. There he is, in this strange new world. The only conclusion that seems obvious to him is that, even though he has no idea how, he ended up reincarnating in another universe, where he lives inside an RPG in the skin of a child dragon. Thinking about it now, the dragon can no longer clearly remember who he was before this. He only has the feeling that he used to be human, as if his memories had been devoured just like the Shadow Worm. Speaking of which, when he looks back, the winged lizard notices the sudden presence of several shadow worms very close to him. And now that he is leveled up, he no longer feels the slightest fear of that type of enemy. On the contrary, he attacks the entire group without hesitation, tearing them apart one by one and accumulating enough experience points to reach level 3 as a baby dragon. With that, he gains access to Baby Breath, a fire ability that greatly increases his combat capability, making his path to more and more experience points much easier. In that same fight, due to the number of enemies defeated, the baby dragon acquires other skills like Dragon Punch, reaching as high as level 15. Then, after finishing off all the worms in the area, his stomach starts rumbling again. Even with all the insects available for him to eat, the dragon thinks about eating something different this time, and then he spots a handful of mushrooms near a tree. However, after eating those fungi, all he gets is an intoxication that makes him throw everything up, which teaches him a valuable lesson. Don't eat random mushrooms without knowing what they are. At least, the clever little guy acquired the skill Poison Resistance, although his clumsy title has now increased to level 3. Next, the baby dragon quickly realizes he won't survive just on insects. So after feeling sick from the mushroom, it's time to look for a new prey, something with more substance. Going deeper into the forest, the dragon comes across a level 6 gray wolf, whose stats are weaker than his. Right away, he thinks it would be a great idea to hunt that wolf. So, showing impressive speed, he positions himself next to the lupine creature and scorches it with fire. In fact, by doing that, he notices he could turn his victims into a nice barbecue, which ends up improving his cooking skills in this wild world. Separating a grilled piece of meat and taking a bite, he concludes that this is exactly what he needed. As time goes by, the baby dragon starts enjoying hunting gray wolves and grilling them, eventually reaching level 20. Since he needs to reach level 25 to evolve again, the baby believes it shouldn't take long, although he notices he's leveling up more and more slowly. At least he's practically becoming a professional grill master from roasting so much meat, which means he's adapting to this new life without too many problems. Even so, it's really annoying to spend the days only listening to the divine voice, which has sort of become his only friend in this strange world, even though, truth be told, she's far from being a friend at this point. Speaking of which, the baby dragon hears distant voices, and although he can't understand a single word, he gets excited upon realizing they are human voices. Without wasting time, hiding behind a tree, he approaches and discovers a trio of humans dressed in tunics and armor, yet another proof that the baby dragon is indeed in a medieval fantasy world. And speaking of that, he needs to remind himself at all times that he is now a dragon, something that could scare people. Still, thinking he's cute enough to show himself without being lynched, the baby checks the trio's status. Levels 11, 14, and 6, respectively. None of them are stronger than the dragon, although their advantage lies in their numbers. Either way, eager to meet new people, the baby dragon officially launches Operation Friendship and uses all his charm to win the adventurers' sympathy. Even so, even without understanding what they were saying, The dragon sees a malicious smile on the lips of the man in front, and with no time to react, he takes a sword slash to the belly that opens a huge wound. The dragon insists he doesn't want to be a threat to humans, but he is struck by an electric spell from the group's mage, leaving his body numb. He gains magic resistance from it, but he's far from intact in this fight. On the contrary, the poor baby is practically already at death's door, hearing the enemy's footsteps approaching. The baby dragon regrets believing humans could become friends with him, and after struggling so much to evolve from an egg to this stage, he sees no way out of the mess he got himself into. Therefore, this is his end. In one last attempt to escape, the baby refuses to die and tries to move his body. But the wound is so severe that it no longer makes sense to try. At that moment, as the warrior prepares for the final blow, the level 6 girl from the trio steps in front of him to stop the attack. The hatchling doesn't know what she's saying, but her body language makes it clear that she's defending him. Then the same woman begins healing the monster with magic, giving him a warm and comforting feeling. For a moment, he thinks she's asking if he's okay, but even though he isn't, that's what her smile suggests. The dragon opens her status window and discovers her name is Myria Melania, a human of Earth. Even though she was almost out of mana points, the girl kept healing him an unbelievable attitude. Because of that healing, the dragon's body was slowly recovering from the paralysis, thinking that she would only leave once he was completely healed. The baby dragon planned to keep pretending he was still in bad shape, even after his body had regenerated, which earned him the title Liar from the Divine Voice. Once again, the hatchling thought he understood what the girl had said, until he obtained the skill Greek language, suggesting that he would understand people better and better as he leveled up this technique. Suddenly, a sinister sound from some creature echoed through the forest, and the two men from the trio, who were farther away, began screaming in despair. Myria ran to help, but the baby dragon grabbed her by the sleeve. Judging by the screams of the two guys who were stronger than she was, the hatchling was certain that the healer would die easily, especially since she had no mana points left. Even so, Myria pulled free from the dragon and kept running to help her companions. Meanwhile, because he hadn't been completely healed, the dragon's body was still partially paralyzed, preventing him from moving. Desperate, he forced his body to get up and, driven by the desire to help that girl, he broke through the paralysis and ran after her. Soon, when he reached the source of the noise, he found himself facing a C-rank stone hatchling, with an absurd HP of 197. Around the giant creature, Myria and the others were lying on the ground, apparently unconscious. Finally, the stone monster turned toward the baby dragon and attacked. By a hair, the baby escapes death with a jump, and, after hiding in the bushes, he thinks about how stupid he was for believing he could win by working with humans. By the way, he also questions in what way that guy is supposed to be a dwarf, because the thing is huge. Then he sees Myria fallen on the ground and realizes that, although she is alive, the enemy is going after her. So, determined to keep her from being killed for good, the baby runs toward her, but he is interrupted halfway by intrusive thoughts telling him to run away. Suddenly, the divine voice grabs hold of his body, making him admit to himself that he really does not have the necessary skills to defeat a creature of that size. But he refuses to simply abandon someone who saved him not long ago. With that, the baby moves toward the opponent and, when attacked by its tail, he rolls and earns the title King of Evasion, and even manages to hit the enemy's head using that same move. When he lands on the ground, he notices that the mage of the group has kicked the bucket, but the warrior is still alive. Keeping in mind that he could still save these people, the baby continues using his rolling technique to deal with the enemy, having developed great mastery over this skill after spending time as an egg. However, of course, his idea is not to defeat this monster, but to lure it away so he can later return and rescue the people. Even so, the stone dragon stomps the ground and lifts a huge amount of dirt, striking the baby directly, who is shocked that this thing even has an area attack. For that reason, knowing that dodging isn't very effective, the baby jumps toward the enemy and throws a fire punch. However, the enemy regenerates and makes even clearer that it cannot be defeated. Still, the little guy sees this as his chance to put Myria over his shoulder and escape. At that moment, he looks at the man who is still alive, but knowing he has no time to save both, he at least could take the girl away. While carrying Myria to a safe place, the dragon realizes she is losing HP because she is bleeding, so, in a desperate attempt, he tries to cast a healing spell, but realizing he must act instead of relying on a fantasy in his head, He uses his sharp sense of smell to find out from which direction Myria came, in hopes of finding a safe place. After identifying the human's scent, he runs that way with great effort and needs to double his speed when he is attacked by a pack of gray wolves that, by insisting on the chase, manage to surround the dragon. With no escape, the monster defends himself. A few minutes later, Myria slowly opens her eyes and sees the baby dragon standing against several wolves at the same time, fighting bravely against all of them to protect the human. But she soon closes her eyes again and blacks out, after winning the fight with enormous effort, already at night. The baby dragon continues escaping with Myria on his shoulders. However, he begins to reach his physical limit. Luckily, just as he is about to collapse, the dragon finds a human village and cries out for help. Unfortunately, the humans do not understand what he is saying. They only hear the horrible growls of the creature he truly is. So the men who hear the sound run outside armed with work tools to protect themselves. One of them even drives a spear into the dragon's leg, and the poor creature can do nothing but hold Myria on his shoulder and beg for help. Fortunately, one of the men recognizes that the person being held by the creature is Myria, which calms down the others. After insisting many times and realizing he won't get anything across by speaking, the dragon lays the woman on the ground and runs away. The men quickly rush to check on Myria and, seeing her condition is serious, they call for Marielle. Meanwhile, alone in the forest, the baby at least feels relieved that the girl is safe, even though he cannot say the same about his thigh, since the wound left by the spear is terrible. At that moment, he learns that no matter what a dragon does, he is still a dragon. As a consolation prize, the divine voice gives him the title Little Hero. At sunrise, in the village where she was taken, Myria wakes up after a long rest and finds Marielle by her side. The elf had to bring her there to treat her, since the situation was bad enough that she had to use white magic at a level she hadn't used in a long time. Not to mention, Myria slept for 2 full days, which shows just how severe her injuries were. As Myria tries to understand who brought her to the village, Marielle grumbles that, as she had always said, the human shouldn't have let Daz influence her like that. Speaking of which, Myria asks if her companions are alright, and her friend says that Grants is dead. His body was found in the forest, and, from what was said, something very heavy fell on top of him. She also comments that she never imagined Daz would try fighting a stone dragon again, which was a huge stupidity, thinking about it now. Either way, the men didn't find his body, but judging by the situation, he was probably devoured. Believing she is the only one who survived, Myria can't hold back her tears and blames herself for not convincing Daz to turn back before it happened. For her part, despite everything, Marielle is satisfied with the girl's survival, especially because she knows how much Daz isn't the type to listen to others. Even so, Myria doesn't think he is a bad person. If there is something she admires about that man, it is the fact that he is always the first to face the monsters that approach the village. And that was one of the reasons he was such a big influence on the kids. However, something was different on the day they went into the forest. Myria had seen Daz arguing with a man in the tavern just because he said Daz wasn't capable of defeating a stone dragon, since he had run from one last time. Annoyed, the adventurer argued that that was 10 years ago, and today he certainly was capable of taking that monster down. Obsessed with this, the man went after Grants and Myria to join him on a dragon hunt. According to him, Marielle allowed this expedition, although Myria reminded him that the elf had already made it very clear that she should not accompany this guy if he tried to face the stone dragon. However, Daz used emotional blackmail, saying that he and Grants would go after the monster anyway, and that, if the woman didn't go with them, the two of them would possibly be killed. Concerned for her friends, Myria agreed to go with them, as long as Daz promised they would leave if things became too dangerous. Regretting what happened, Marielle states that Daz died because of his huge ego. On the other hand, she celebrates the fact that Myria managed to reach the village despite her severe injuries. Since she brought it up, Myria asks if someone carried her back, and the elf simply says that she was attacked by a monster outside the village. Confused, Myria only remembers that she lost consciousness when she was attacked by the stone dragon, and only woke up now, so it would be impossible for her to have returned on her own. But Marielle insists that this is the only way, since no villager went into the forest that night except for the expedition trio. In fact, as far as the elf knows, Myria was found unconscious at the entrance of the village and was about to be attacked by a monster, but Gregory scared the creature away. Faced with these facts, Marielle believes her friend lost her memory after the intense trauma she suffered. Trying hard to remember what happened, A brief memory of the baby dragon fighting wolves appears in the human's mind, so she asks what the monster that attacked her looked like. But the elf has no idea, since it had already disappeared when she arrived at the scene. Speaking of him, the little hero wakes up and is surprised to have recovered all of his health, something he did not expect considering the severity of his injury. In the end, this seems to be an advantage of being a dragon, since a human would never have the same regeneration. Worried about Myria, the dragon wonders how she is doing. Although he saved the girl, the baby knows he could have easily been killed by that giant creature, because even though he became stronger after evolving, he still couldn't compete with that thing. Everything could have been different if he were more powerful. Therefore, the baby dragon is shaken by a strong desire to become stronger. Driven by his determination, the baby dragon uses a very clever strategy to lure several shadow worms into one place to farm exp. In this case, he hung one worm on a tree, forcing the creature to use its Call Allies skill, thereby controlling the exact spot where reinforcements would appear, what could be called the perfect trap. Because of his idea, the baby dragon was rewarded by the divine voice with the title Path of Evil, which he honestly did not like very much. Regardless, the little guy couldn't waste the opportunity he created, so he went straight for the monsters. Despite admiring their loyalty for coming to help a friend, the baby dragon roasted all of them and leveled up to 25, meeting the requirements for his next evolution. Excited, he is presented with his possible options: Mini Dragon, Mini Angel Dragon, Child Dragon, Marble Child Dragon, Plague Young Dragon. Confused, the first thing the baby notices is that the last one seems quite sinister. Now he has a few questions. What on earth is the difference between mini and child, or between baby and little dragon? Fortunately, the divine voice appears to explain that being a little dragon does not mean you are small, but rather that you will not grow beyond your current size. Little dragons level up quickly, but are inferior to babies in terms of abilities and development potential. In short, the little dragon is the short path. It starts strong, though not too strong. On the other hand, the baby dragon is the longer path, starting weaker, but capable of becoming more powerful over time. The divine voice adds that the child type is an improved version of the baby. The mini type does not have many evolution options, but the ones it does have are guaranteed to be good. Finally, the dragon asks what the young type means, but the divine voice simply stays silent. Breaking his head over what to choose, the baby dragon asks for a quick explanation of each of the 5 options. So, the divine voice begins again. The mini dragon is small, like the little dragon, but has slow growth and few evolution paths. In exchange, it can evolve further if it shows potential. The baby thinks this option is terrible because of its slow growth and few future paths, so he discards it immediately. As for the mini angel dragon, known as the helper spirit, this dragon devotes its life to helping others. But although it is good with white magic, it is not effective in combat. Assessing this option, the baby doesn't like the idea of being weak in battle, but he remembers how much he wanted healing magic like Myria. Next, the child dragon is the natural evolution of the baby dragon, which, as it grows, strengthens its physical abilities, something that greatly appeals to the baby, as it is a recommended path for his current class. Moving on to the marble child dragon, these dragons have undergone a mutation and have a drop-shaped pattern on their skin. They possess more magical power than most other dragons. The baby considers this option, thinking it would be good to have strong magic in the long run, and the mutation sounds like something special. Lastly, the plague young dragon, the first step toward becoming an evil dragon that spreads disaster wherever it goes. Although they are known for dying young, they are extremely intelligent and can take on human form, even if they live solitary lives. At the end of the explanation, the baby dragon was covering his ears since he no longer considered this option due to its horrible traits. But he ended up hearing the part about being able to take on a human form, which could be his big chance to enter villages and try to live a normal life without being stabbed in the thigh by a spear. From that point on, he weighs everything and is left with a cruel dilemma, since, as we all know, this class has plague in its name for a reason, just as the divine voice said. On one hand, the lizard knows this seems like a terrible idea, but he also worries a lot about Myria, and he wants the ability to transform into a human so much so he can live a pure and honest life alongside his friends, and if everything goes wrong, he can simply return to normal. With that in mind, the baby dragon decides, once and for all, to become a young plague dragon. After transforming and looking at his reflection in the water, the poor thing begins to regret it. because he truly looks like an evil being. Then he learns from the divine voice that his status check ability has leveled up. So now he can analyze the details of each technique he has. Besides that, the divine voice itself has reached level 2, and the young plague dragon has gained the skills Flight and Dragon Scale Dust. His bite ability evolved into poisonous fangs, and he also received several other powers that give the dragon a headache. Lastly, he receives the title Calamity, and the villain title has risen to level 2. Starting to become genuinely worried about the class he chose, the dragon checks his abilities and cannot find human transformation anywhere, which was the one thing he wanted most. Desperate, he demands explanations from the divine voice, but it cannot provide that type of information at his current level. After lying down for a while to reflect on everything that's happening, the young plague dragon collects his thoughts for a moment and tries to figure out other important things, such as who the divine voice even is. Again, it says it cannot give information about that. So the dragon turns his attention to Dragon Scale Dust. The divine voice explains that when the dragon flaps his wings, he can spread a weakening miasma that affects everything around him. At the maximum level, he can poison entire nations simply by flying over them. Hearing that, the young dragon flaps his wings and immediately kills a flower, making him realize he is basically a walking biological weapon. Next, he asks for an explanation about his pestilent breath ability, which is basically blowing an infected breath in the enemy's face. Besides causing serious debuffs, it is extremely contagious, so much so that it once exterminated an entire civilization. More and more worried that he might be the villain of this story, the reincarnated boy asks if the titles he received are at least something other than evil. The voice explains the first one, Mini Hero, granted to those who have shown modest courage and whose kindness might one day lead them to a more advanced heroic status. This title provides a slight increase in the damage of certain weapons, as well as having a deep impact on the dragon's evolutionary path, thinking he might escape the evil path if he keeps leveling that title. The young plague dragon asks about the villain title. The divine voice explains that it is meant for diabolical villains who leave mountains of bodies behind, laughing wickedly as they count how many people they have killed in their lives. This title grants a small increase to dark-type powers, makes learning white magic more difficult over time, and reduces regeneration rate, also being highly influential in the dragon's evolutionary path. Terrified once again, the young plague dragon thrashes on the ground, certain that he made the worst possible choice. Meanwhile, Myria and Mariel check the protection stones spread throughout the village, since they create a barrier around the territory and must be working perfectly. In reality, this barrier is a charm spell that subconsciously discourages creatures from passing through it, but it is ineffective against monsters with strong determination or a very clear goal in mind, making Myria wonder if, in the end, that little creature really was trying to protect her. Either way, since that thing managed to get past the barrier, Mariel needs to make sure it never happens again. So the two head to the next protection stone for the elf to cast a spell on it. At that moment, Myria admits she has a strong feeling that she was saved by that little dragon in the forest. The elf asks if the human is developing feelings for a monster, and Myria quickly explains that she is not. The friend then explains that monsters evolve into different forms and become stronger as this happens, and that they can level up by hunting other creatures. Different types have different maximum levels, and once a monster reaches this peak, it evolves a rank, then repeats the process until it becomes more and more powerful. Myria finds it hard to believe that people in the past discovered the nature of monsters, but Mariel doesn't understand what the woman means, since she herself already told Myria these things 11 years ago. The issue, according to the human, is that she was only 5 years old at the time and so short that she had to look up to face the elf. Feeling like she was called short, Mariel looks at Myria with a face that says she could easily commit several misdeeds against her. Setting that aside, she explains that special people appear from time to time, capable of hearing the divine voice and sharing information about monsters, levels, and everything else. For example, there are saints and heroes responsible for humanity, knowing everything it knows about this subject. In any case, in summary, every creature seeks only power, which makes them increasingly ferocious and dangerous. If that dragon really saved Myria, the elf is certain that one day those fangs will turn against the human, because monsters are nothing more than reflections of their own instincts, and it is not wise to place human expectations on a being that is nothing more than that. In the end, coexistence between monsters and humans is simply incompatible. Speaking of him, the young plague dragon doesn't give up after realizing he is on the path to becoming the villain of the story. On the contrary, he promises himself he will evolve very quickly so he can return to the right path. Just like in Ice Sky stories, he wants to be the hero, not the demon king. Above all, he needs to learn human transformation so he can go to Myria's village. Finally, the dragon begins his journey in search of XP to level up and get out of this situation as soon as possible. But the bad phase keeps following him. After all, the poor guy is suddenly tangled in a web while calmly walking through the forest. And if the web was strong enough to hold a dragon, it's only fair that the one responsible for it is just as strong. In this case, a giant spider shows up to wrap up her dinner with her D-rank strength. Besides being trapped, the dragon assumes he's not capable of defeating an enemy with that kind of power. But when he receives another burst of web, he needs to act quickly. So he responds with a baby breath, burning the spider's backside that was pointed right at him. However, the web surrounding him also starts catching fire, forcing him to roll on the ground to extinguish it, which at least grants the lizard the fire resistance skill. To improve the situation, the spider is now under the burning status, leaving her vulnerable to a physical attack from the dragon. Soon, the winged monster strikes his opponent with paralytic venom claws, but the arachnid's HP is still at half, which convinces the dragon that killing this creature really isn't going to happen. So he takes advantage of her paralysis and gets out of there as fast as possible. But as if that weren't enough, the spider already breaks free from the paralysis and starts chasing the runaway at full speed. Luckily, the young plague dragon remembers he gained the fly skill, so he jumps and flaps his wings with all his strength to take off once and for all. Even so, for some reason he still can't actually fly and is forced to return to the ground and keep rolling away. 10 minutes later, the chase is still going on, and the dragon has already given up on the idea that the spider might run out of energy. Fortunately, he levels up his roll skill to level 3, which increases his escape speed and grants him the title Chicken Run. Even annoyed with this cowardly title, the lizard can't think about it for long, because he's heading straight toward a cliff. At high speed, there's no time to stop, and he just confirmed that his flying ability isn't reliable. One way or another, the only option is to roll as fast as possible and jump, hoping to reach the other side. He does it, and upon reaching the sky with good momentum, the young plague dragon spreads his wings and manages to glide to the other side of the cliff. Thinking he escaped the threat, he looks back and notices a small detail. The spider is weaving a web to cross the abyss. Without delay, she leaps in front of him and resumes the chase in the same way. At least, as some consolation, the dragon leveled up his rolling to level 4. Along the path, a distracted gray wolf appears and is run over, granting 20 experience points to the young plague dragon. Because of the walking egg title, he receives a bonus of 12 points, leveling up from 1 straight to 3, and the wolf wasn't the only victim of the lizard's rolling. Whatever appeared in front of him kept getting smashed, raising him to level 8 enough to maybe confront the creature he's been running from. Taking the risk, the young plague dragon turns toward the spider and checks his skills. Among them was one called Double Venom, which he has no idea what it does. Either way, the strategy is to get close enough to unleash a full power baby breath. However, the spider suddenly releases a smoke with 2 different colors, which is probably the Double Venom. The dragon is able to move thanks to his resistance, but he must stay alert not to expose himself to the substances for too long. The spider is clearly waiting for him to faint so she can strike. But since she doesn't know he has resistance, he thinks of a counter strategy, pretending to be dead so the enemy approaches. After acting his heart out, the young plague dragon would feel like an idiot if it didn't work. But the opponent falls for the trick and gets close enough to take a baby breath. With her body in flames, she takes a tail strike that ends the fight for good. With this victory, the young plague dragon evolves to level 14, which to him is a huge upgrade. Also, his baby breath skill has gone up to level 3, and he gains the dragon tail skill for having used his tail in the fight. Even so, the dragon is anxious to finally receive his ability to transform into a human. However, the divine voice ends the announcements and leaves the poor guy hanging. Frustrated, the little flying lizard picks up the wolf he ran over and goes off in search of a shelter for the night. At some point on his walk, he finds a cave and shouts to check whether someone is inside, but no one answers. So he uses the hole as a home for today and lights a fire to roast the meat. Although he loves grilled meat, the dragon complains that the smell is still awful. So he gets the idea of squeezing onto it the fruits he found earlier, since they have a good pepper-like scent. After doing that, the experience definitely improves 100%. and the dragon is sure he's found a way to take his meals to another level. By the way, since this cave is up for grabs, the young monster doesn't want to give anyone the chance to steal the place, so he decides to use it as a base while he looks for more of those red fruits. On the other hand, the cave is too wet and sticky to preserve the fruit, so it would be better to dry them outside. From that thought alone, the dragon receives the title Master Chef, which makes him feel like he's on Big Brother, with how much his private life is observed at every step. Finally, after filling his belly with meat, the mini-hero thinks it would be amazing to become popular in that village thanks to his cooking. But he quickly remembers that the sharp claws he has aren't exactly the kind of thing a human wants to see. Before anything else, he cannot mingle with those people while being a dragon. That is, at least he was cuter when he was a baby dragon. But now he has large, pointed fangs, as well as those eyes that exude wickedness, which even makes him think that not even that girl would be able to recognize him now. Desperate, the young plague dragon begs the heavens to grant him human transformation, because up to this moment he is stuck in the role of humanity's villain. However, his prayers are not answered. Meanwhile, in a tavern in the village, Myria finds out that Dawes was seen by Mr. Burt's at a nearby pond while he was fishing. Out of nowhere, at a certain moment during the fishing, Dawes simply walked past him and, mumbling something, went into the bushes. Upon hearing this story, Mr. Burt's friends think he is making it up, since he drinks every day. Although the fisherman insists that he did not see things, everything was very clear to him. Seeing that the woman is acting strangely, one of the men sitting at the table asks Myria not to blame herself for what happened, but she says it's fine and leaves without further explanation. Without wasting time, she tells Marielle that she is going into the forest after Dawes, but the elf puts her foot down because of the danger involved. Besides, if Dawes were really alive, he would already have returned to the village. Even so, Myria suggests that a search party be formed to go after the man, but the elder does not want to put anyone's life at risk. On the other hand, since her friend is obviously desperate, the elf promises to ask the Adventurers Guild to investigate the case. The next day, after having eaten and slept well, the young plague dragon feels ready to evolve a lot, until he finally obtains his ability to transform into a human. After washing his face in a lake, he sees something strange at the water's edge, as if it were a slime or something like that. However, when he looks at the creature's status, the dragon's head begins to throb with so much pain. At the same time, the status view skill rises from level 3 to level 4, even though the dragon cannot see the attributes of that gelatinous monster. Before he noticed it, the lizard was attacked by fragments of slime that had separated from the main body to chase after their target. Obviously, the young plague dragon ran off without thinking twice and ended up hiding behind a tree. After catching his breath, he remembered that he had managed to roughly analyze that thing's status, and it didn't seem like anything special, but either way, he decided to drop the whole mess and get away from the trouble, so he could continue along another path. With that in mind, the dragon wandered through a part of the forest and came face to face with a stray jar that sparked his curiosity. Maybe it was filled with fruit or something else worth eating. However, instead of that, the jar itself revealed it was actually a monster. The Tartajar, which if you didn't catch it from the name is a jar that resembles a turtle. Unsure whether he was looking at a jar or a turtle, the flying lizard charged in with a dragon punch, but the blow only took a measly 1 HP from the opponent, which felt humiliating from the attacker's perspective. Since things were going that way, he raised the bar and started hitting the jar in every way he could think of. But the creature used its sleep ability to keep recovering its HP, basically protecting itself with its shell while regenerating during the fight. Tired of the nonsense, the young plague dragon grabbed the supposed turtle to see if it really knew how to swim, then tossed the creature off the cliff that ended in a river. With that, he earned 36 experience points and, because of his walking egg title, got a few extra points as well, leveling up from 14 to 15. On top of that, he gained the title Rogue King, and his Malefactor title leveled up from 2 to 3. However, aside from these last gains, another situation didn't look promising at all. A whole legion of Tartajars appeared to help their friend who, upon being thrown off the cliff, had used its Call Allies skill which, unsurprisingly, called its allies. To raise the stakes, the army of walking jars merged into one, forming the Tartajar Megazord, which was literally one climbing on top of another their choice, becoming a mountain of jars or turtles. The young plague dragon, for his part, didn't acknowledge them at all. He simply grabbed the first jar at the base of the stack and threw it at the vertical line of enemies, shattering all of them at once. With that, he acquired the meteorite skill. He also earned 594 experience points, not counting the walking egg bonus, and that took him straight from level 15 to 30. This also raised his flight skill from 1 to 2, and status vision from 4 to 5. Without a doubt, the dragon realized that defeating an entire group of Tartajars had been the best thing he could have done. Speaking of which, he checked the jars those creatures used as shells and noted that they didn't seem to be made of material as sturdy as you'd expect. Setting that aside, the important part was that he now had enough meat to eat until he felt sick. But speaking of feeling sick, he thought it would be good to have a little salad to balance his diet. And lastly, since the topic was balance, what was really leaving the poor guy shaken was the fact that he still hadn't unlocked his long-dreamed-of ability to transform into a human. And it was even more frustrating knowing he had leveled up 10 times and that damn skill still hadn't shown up. Suddenly, while walking through the forest, the young plague dragon saw the sky glowing with an intense purple light, along with the sound of footsteps among the trees. Cautious, he advanced quietly, searching for the source of the noise, and eventually found some kind of bear wandering through the woods. On the other hand, there was something strange about that animal, especially the way it walked. Since it was too far away, he couldn't see its status, but he could at least check its species. It was a mud bear, meaning a Barurso, a D+ rank monster. Even though the level wasn't that high, he couldn't afford to underestimate it, especially because it had good recovery skills. Since it was the same level as the young plague dragon, he wondered whether he could take it head-on. But what caught his attention most was the fact that the creature was made of mud. Maybe, after defeating the bear, he could mold the mud using fire and build a custom jar to serve as furniture for his shack. With that idea in mind, the winged lizard took advantage of the mud bear being distracted and approached quietly, climbing onto a strategic tree trunk that offered the best angle for an attack. Once ready, the dragon leapt in and was already smiling at the easy victory, but was caught off guard when the bear simply opened its belly, revealing an interior full of mud spikes, as if its torso were an Iron Maiden, that medieval torture device. Afraid of being lovingly embraced by that paradise of spikes, the dragon relied on agility, using his roll skill, which gave him the mobility he needed to avoid becoming paste inside the beast's artificial stomach. With a sequence of rolls no comment, the dragon managed to take 15 of the bear's 40 GP. But as the divine voice had made clear, this creature had excellent restoration abilities, and of course it used that skill to return its health to full. Seeing the situation, the dragon rolled around the mud bear while thinking of a way to finish it off. At his current level, defeating this opponent in a single blow was out of the question. The strongest thing he had learned so far seemed to be meteorite, but obviously he couldn't grab a monster this big and toss it like he had done with the Tartajar. So for now, the strategy would be roll, hit, and run. Roll, hit, and run, repeating the process while the mud bear lost mana. However, tired of being rolled on, the mud bear surprised him by unleashing a sandstorm which, once it ended, left the bear transformed into an even sturdier and spikier version of itself, preventing the dragon from continuing to attack with his roll. On the other hand, the mud bear has only 19 mana points left out of a total of 100, which shows that it's at its limit. Even so, the enemy can still put up a fight, enough to tear off one of its own spikes and throw it at the target, who dodges by reflex at the very last moment. Analyzing the material the opponent's body is made of more carefully, the young plague dragon counterattacks and, taking advantage of his speed, quickly closes the distance and rips off one of the mud bear's arms. After all, it seems that the clay softens when it's far from the bear's body. Not only that, the dragon is smart enough to shape the arm into a sphere that can be used in his meteorite skill. Said and done, the young plague dragon delivers a powerful strike that melts the mud bear's entire upper half, finishing the fight and granting a total of 150 XP, which was doubled because of the title walking egg. Right away, the dragon goes from level 30 to 33, in addition to earning the title Nutcracker, certainly because of the way meteorite works. By the way, just as he had thought from the start, the lizard really did use the bear's clay to improve the decoration of his humble home, which even gained a clay oven as a bonus. After lighting firewood inside it, the dragon decides to get some food while the furnace heats up. In the middle of the woods, he finds a lightning mushroom which, according to the divine voice, sucks all the nutrition from the tree it grows on and, because of that, is unable to produce fruit. On the other hand, this leech-like trait makes it extremely nutritious and delicious, even though it has a paralyzing poison. Since he has no resistance to that, The dragon throws the mushroom away and moves on to the next possible food source, but gets distracted and doesn't notice that one of the flowers on the path was actually a carnivorous plant. Even so, the lizard was fast enough to react and cut the plant in half, eliminating the danger on the spot. According to the Divine Voice's assessment, that creature is capable of eating animals, but it's unable to digest salt, and because of that, the salt accumulates in the white part of its root. Incidentally, since salt is indispensable for cooking, the dragon already knows what to do with the extra root. Meanwhile, at the village gate, Myria thinks sadly about the things Marielle told her. But even though the elf told her not to leave on this mission, the human doesn't want to waste time and lose the chance of finding Daz alive. After all, according to Mr. Burtz's story, Daz was walking through the forest in a strange way. She doesn't know whether it's true or not, but the report was enough to make the sorceress hit the road. Say whatever you want about Daz, but the woman cares about him, and she still blames herself for not stopping him from leaving on that mission that ended the way it did. On the way, Myria is attacked by a shadow worm, but she destroys the monster with a fireball. After finishing the fight calmly, she reflects that everything will be fine as long as she stays calm. Returning to the dragon's expedition to find new snacks, he comes across the shrew monster, a creature capable of moving at higher levels and attacking people, and its flavor, which resembles meat, makes it a highly desired delicacy. Happy to have found something decent to eat, the dragon then encounters another strange mushroom, this time called Moro Troja, which, unlike the others that were at best level C in value, has an A-level value. This mushroom is so valuable that it can restore an entire nation's economy if well cultivated. As if that weren't enough, it's a hallucinogen that causes intense euphoria, meaning only positive traits. 500 years ago, people discovered that they could mix this mushroom with certain stimulants, which ended up creating a massive number of drug addicts in that society. Upon hearing that last part, the dragon doesn't think twice before setting fire to the entire cluster of Moro Troja, raising his mini-hero title from level 1 to 2. Meanwhile, Myria hid from a wolf pack running toward the direction she was walking, allowing her to continue her path once they passed. At that moment, the young plague dragon finds a fruit called Piperus, valued at beep, with a unique aroma that stimulates appetite and was, for a time, considered the most popular seasoning. Long ago, the demand for such high-quality spices was so great that this fruit was worth gold. The lizard takes some home to try the spice out. Speaking of home, Myria is getting farther and farther from hers and, as a result, is wandering deeper into the forest. She knows that as she goes deeper, the dangers she may encounter will get worse, so she decides to take another look at the areas closer to the village and then return home. When the dragon returns to his shack, he manages to use the lightning mushroom as a source of electricity to light the cave. Besides that, the oven had already heated enough to harden the clay he had shaped into cooking pots. Without wasting a second, he begins preparing dinner with the delicious ingredients he collected in the woods, resulting in a magnificent dish brought to life by the salt and seasoning. After devouring a portion of the meal, the dragon levels his Master Chef title to level 2, and also gains the Artisan title for his ceramic work. Feeling no nostalgia for his former life, he gets excited thinking about what he'll build next for his home or what he'll cook for tomorrow's lunch. The next day, during a carriage ride, a beastwoman hears that they've arrived at the forest, so she wakes Miss Melcia from her sleep. When they step off the vehicle, she has no doubt that this is the place the guild sent them to investigate, Noah Forest. Some time later, the dragon returns from another hunt and, besides separating the pelts of the wolves he hunted, uses part of the collected meat to prepare lunch and leaves the rest to dry outside the cave. However, before long, some monkeys steal the meat hanging from the trees to eat it, which makes the dragon furious. He definitely needs to do something to stop anyone from stealing his food. So he begins preparing a poisonous potion with several suspicious mushrooms and soaks the meat that will serve as bait for the monkeys. By the way, the mini-hero has started to tell which plants are poisonous and which are not, now without the help of the Divine Voice. Setting aside the poisoning of the monkeys for a moment, he finds a beautiful flower field whose soil grows the perfect flowers to decorate his little house flowers that, with their unmatched beauty, could serve as a remedy for the pains of the world. Suddenly, in the middle of his poetic thoughts about flowers, the mini-hero sees a creature sprout from beneath the blossoms, something he had never seen before. According to the status panel, it was Leserda, the poison princess, owner of an endless amount of extremely poisonous abilities. The dragon becomes afraid to get close to the monster, and for good reason. Lacerda bites the dragon's shoulder and injects a dose that increases his poison resistance from level 3 to level 4. But the substance is so strong that it makes the lizard fall to the ground and lose part of his movement. After checking the system to understand what had hit him, the dragon reads that it was a type of special poison, but the divine voice couldn't provide any further information about it at his current level. Not knowing what to do, the protagonist decides to inspect the caterpillar's information to see if he can learn anything. Then the divine voice reveals that the poison princess Lacerda is rank D and is a sneaky creature that poisons its prey and flees, later returning to feed on the victim. The princess's bodily fluid can become an antidote to her own poison, and Lacerda uses this to bargain over whether the victim will live or die, at the very least able to move thanks to his high poison resistance. The dragon plans to capture Lacerda while she waits nearby for him to die. Soon, seeing that she is being chased, the caterpillar starts running in the same style. The dragon usually uses rolling, turning it into a high-speed chase toward the cliff the dragon knows lies ahead, since he himself came across it when running from that spider. In the middle of this, the mini-hero evolves rolling from level 4 to 5, which gives him enough confidence to increase his speed. But suddenly, he is hit by a mud weapon that Lacerda manages to fire while rolling, something that seems absurd to him. From that point on, when he returns to the chase, the young plague dragon has to deal with a barrage of mud shots coming at him. Even so, if there is one thing the mini-hero knows how to do, it is roll. And with this skill he manages to maneuver around the projectiles and collide with the poison princess Lacerda, who ends up falling toward the cliff, since he absolutely cannot lose his antidote. The dragon jumps to grab the caterpillar in midair. The poison damages his body, making his movements and reflexes difficult. But with enough effort he not only manages to capture the poison princess, he also promises that he will save her despite everything she did. After saying that, the malefactor uses his baby breath downward to propel himself upward, returning to solid ground. On the other hand, what is not solid at all is the amount of poison inside his body, and no wonder the poor guy is practically dying. As if that weren't enough, the young flying lizard still says that what matters is that Lacerda is fine, and she only shows him the tip of her tail in response. Hours later, returning to the forest once again in search of her companion, Myria Melania still finds no clue. At the same time, Marielle calls out her friend's name to find out where she went, and upon hearing her voice, the human girl steps out of the woods to see what's going on. The elf explains that she was worried about Myria and went to her house, but she wasn't there. So now she wants to know what the girl was up to. Myria answers that she was in bed after feeling a bit sick with a cold, but decided to take a walk as soon as she felt better. Marielle directly asks if she hasn't been going into the forest, and she promptly denies it. Although suspicious, Marielle says she believes her friend and informs her that the guild's adventurers are already arriving in the village, so Myria doesn't need to worry. With that said, the elf asks for a little help with her shopping, and the human follows right behind, afraid her lie might be discovered. Back to the young plague dragon, he wakes up startled and tries to run through all the details of what happened to him so far. Remembering that he was poisoned, he sees Lacerda right in front of him and thinks she was simply waiting for him to die from the poison. But soon notices that his arms are no longer heavy, so he asks if the caterpillar gave him the antidote. She nods, and the dragon picks her up with his claws and emphasizes how the two of them went through an intense battle of blood, sweat, and tears, which probably made the little one realize they are soulmates. In fact, now that he's looking at her more closely, the mini-hero even finds her kind of cute. When night comes, he prepares a meal for his new cave companion, and by the way she is eating, she seems to like it a lot. Taking advantage of the moment, the dragon realizes that neither of them actually has a name, since young plague dragon and poison princess Lacerda are just the names of their species. Still, he concludes that they don't need names and decides to keep calling the caterpillar you. Hearing that, the caterpillar approaches and snuggles against the dragon's face, and he notices how attached she already seems to him. Because of that, he allows her to stay in the cave as long as she wants. Meanwhile, Lacerda sees a jar full of poison created by the cave's owner and immediately starts eating it as if it were a meal. The mini-hero panics, but soon assumes that by eating something poisonous, she strengthens her own venom. Speaking of which, the big guy becomes curious about the taste, since the little one is devouring it so happily. So he dips his finger into the jar and puts the poison in his mouth, which immediately causes severe side effects throughout his body. though as a reward, his poison resistance increases from level 4 to 5. The next morning, a wolf pack attacks the young plague dragon and his newest companion. Lacerda fires her mud weapon and knocks down some of the wolves, while her partner handles the rest with kicks and punches. With the mission successful, the impression left is that they make a good pair. Afterwards, the two work together to gather some coconuts and enjoy an afternoon snack, further strengthening their bond. At nightfall, the dragon is awakened by the caterpillar hitting her pointed tail against his chest, making him think about how dangerous that is. After all, that tail is still lethally poisonous. Because of this, he hopes the little one won't bite him while she sleeps, but assumes she won't be as restless anymore, since she already seems to have adapted quickly to her new home. Thinking about everything he has achieved, the mini-hero reflects that his life hasn't been bad at all. One day later, the pair gathers some piperus for the caterpillar to try, but Lacerda doesn't seem to like the smell very much and refuses to eat it, something her friend understands, since seasoning isn't meant to be eaten on its own anyway. In fact, the little one had caught the scent of something far more appealing, and when she finally found what had pleased her so much, it was simply a mushroom with a disturbing appearance and aroma. According to the divine voice, it was a Candida cadaverus, a B-rank mushroom that emits the stench of a corpse and contains a powerful poison. Disgusted as he watches his companion heading straight toward that disgusting thing to gorge herself on it, the young plague dragon can't stand it and burns the mushroom with his fire, which instantly enrages the caterpillar, who smacks him in the face several times in a row. In response, the dragon promises to make it up to his friend by giving her another poisonous plant. Suddenly, Lacerda prepares a mud shot, which makes the poor dragon think he's about to die because of a vulture-smelling mushroom. However, the caterpillar fires toward two animals that were lurking in a bush right behind them, forcing them out and revealing their frightening appearance. Or rather, it was only one animal, a dog-like creature with two heads, that makes the dragon feel a terrible chill down his spine when he checks its status. This creature, called Twin Heads, not only has broken attributes, but also possesses abilities with terrifying names like Gravity and Graviton. This makes the dragon think he has no chance of winning a fight. But the dog also has an ability called Sniff, which makes any attempt to escape much more difficult. In that case, the only possible path seems to be a direct confrontation. And after reaching an agreement with the Poison Princess, the winged lizard charges at the Twin Heads to create the perfect distraction so his partner can inject her venom into the enemy. Without a second thought, the dragon rushes in to throw a punch at one of the heads while Lacerda hides at the top of a tree. However, the other head protects the first with brute strength, while the protected one seems to lean toward another fighting style. Forming a magic circle near its mouth, the blue head generates a gravitational field above the opponent, pinning him to the ground. This creates serious problems for the dragon, who can't move and becomes an easy target. But as soon as he's attacked by Twin Heads, the Poison Princess fires mud at them, disabling the gravitational power that was restraining the protagonist. Now free, the winged monster retaliates with a devastating blast of fire. However, the blue head is able to regenerate the damage with magic, clearly noticing that the angry brown head deals physical damage and the sad blue head deals magical damage. The dragon sees the blue head preparing a magic circle larger than the previous ones, suggesting it's about to use that thing called Graviton, which he absolutely cannot allow to happen under any circumstances. With that in mind, the mini-hero runs as fast as he can toward the enemy to prevent the worst. His reckless approach causes him to get bitten by the brown head, but at the same time, he manages to land a punch on the blue head's face. At that moment being the perfect distraction, Lacerda strikes, biting into the blue head's neck. The venom spreads quickly while the blue head does everything it can to cure the condition. However, seeing its HP drop rapidly and death becoming certain, the brown head simply bites off its twin to prevent the toxin from reaching it. Witnessing this horror show, the young plague dragon promises never to evolve into anything that has two heads. Analyzing Twin Head's status, the winged lizard assumes the remaining dog will no longer be able to use magic till he suddenly notices that these things have an ability called Sacrifice. At that moment, the blue head, despite being severed, flies straight toward the Poison Princess and almost swallows her whole, if not for the caterpillar's great agility. Even so, the severed head continues chasing its prey in a terrifying manner, and when the dragon tries to help, he's stopped by the brown dog, which now stands before him to see which of the two will leave alive. Knowing he must finish this quickly to help his companion, the mini-hero charges into the fight and, after a brief exchange of blows, manages to dominate the struggle and use his nutcracker technique on the dog. destroying it decisively and even leveling the skill up to 2. Quickly, the dragon turns toward his friend and, while racing to find her with the speed of his roll, thinks about how the two met only a few days ago, yet have already been through so much together. In truth, the fact is that the poison Princess Lacerda is the only friend this dragon has in the world, and that's why he tells the divine voice he no longer needs to transform into a human as long as the caterpillar is safe. On the way, the monster notices a pool of blood and begins to panic when he can't find his companion anywhere. Then suddenly, Lacerda crawls out of a bush, extremely wounded. The blue head appears again, flying at a terrifying speed to attack the caterpillar once more. But the dragon intercepts it with a flurry of punches that turns what's left of the dog into pizza dough once and for all. Without thinking twice, the winged monster runs to check on his friend and expresses how happy he is to see that Lacerda is still alive. At the same time, the dragon receives 234 XP and gets irritated with the divine voice, since he doesn't care about leveling at that moment, but then he hears the system reveal that he has acquired the skill human transformation. And speaking of human, Myria Melania goes to Marielle to inform her that she has cleaned the entrance and the hallway. Since this village never receives visitors, Myria admits she's curious to know what these people are like, and Marielle assures her she'll find out soon. The young woman comments that the book in front of her friend looks quite old, and the elf explains that it's about monsters, believing the girl would like to read it. Marielle picked it up from the library. Truly interested, Myria opens it to a page where the shadow worm was drawn, but the description was written in a language she cannot read. According to Marielle, it's a very old text that describes the monster's rank, which, in this case, is F, meaning even Myria is capable of defeating it. On the other hand, things change when dealing with rank D creatures, which require proper adventurer training before you can defeat them. Going further, of course, monsters ranked B and above are extremely dangerous, so only heroes and saints are able to handle them. Meanwhile, the two dispatched adventurers get closer and closer to the village. Myria sees, in the book, the figure of a stone dragon, the monster that caused all the trouble she faces today. When asked, Marielle replies that this dragon is rank C, but she has heard that this type of creature can grow stronger as it evolves. There is no doubt it could easily kill any ordinary human, and that is why the elder always tells everyone not to wander through the forest. At that moment, the adventurers who were sent out open the door. A short time ago, the beast woman asked Lady Melcia why she accepted a rank C mission even though she was with her, since it's quite difficult and they should have waited for the other members to arrive. However, Melcia said that, actually, it becomes even easier if she only has her current companion with her, because that way they can run away if things get too dangerous. The beast woman wasn't so confident in her ability to escape and asked whether her partner thought she could do it because she's part dog or worse, whether she would leave the poor thing to die and serve as bait while the other one fled. Melcia answered that she was just joking, because even though it's a rank C mission, it's not about killing monsters but about investigating the forest, so it shouldn't be anything major. Lastly, the beast woman reminded her that they're looking for someone who should be dead or something along those lines. Then, the pair found the house they were supposed to find, and according to the report, they were supposed to just open the door upon arrival. So that's what they did. As a result, the two are sitting at Marielle's table. Melcia even comments that it's not common to find elves in a human village. Marielle corrects her, saying that she is actually a half-elf, to be more precise. She is served by Myria and asks the girl to take a little walk, and when she leaves, the half-elf explains that she didn't want the girl to hear the details of the mission. Melcia wants to know who this supposedly dead person is that they're searching for, and the homeowner explains that it's a resident named Daz, who was together with that woman who left in a trio that fought against an earth dragon. After learning the details, the adventurers go out to investigate, and the beast woman doesn't like the fact that Myria is staring at them in that strange way as they leave. A few minutes earlier, Marielle had said that Myria feels responsible for Daz's death and suspects that the girl has been going into the forest to look for him from time to time, which is something very dangerous for her to do alone. That's why the half-elf wants the adventurers to solve this case quickly and put an end to this once and for all. Reviewing the mission beside her partner, Melcia points out that the ideal would be to find the body of this guy named Daz. But in the worst-case scenario, they might not find anything and simply report that no clues were discovered, which would still close the case, even if inconclusively. In the late afternoon, the plague dragon covers Lacerda's body with some medicinal herbs so she can recover inside the cave. While she sleeps, he goes out to test his new status after leveling up once again. especially the skill he has always wanted, the one that will finally turn the monster into a real human. By the way, the dragon takes one last look at his ability window to confirm that it's still there, imagining that he'd be attacked by the poisonous caterpillar if he transformed into a man near the cave. The dragon moves as far away as he can while pretending to himself that he absolutely does not want to go back to that village and see Myria again. However, in the end, he admits it to himself, lamenting that he received this ability right now, when he was beginning to accept that he would live without it. Now, whatever the case may be, the question is what the guy will do if he actually becomes human. Because he definitely does not want to be separated from Lacerda or the cave, while at the same time it would be nice to live in a human village. In that case, the mini-hero thinks it might be interesting to try living in both places, alternating 3 days in each. After all, earning the trust of humans would be incredible, and the young plague dragon can't wait to see whether he would be a handsome man or maybe even a beautiful woman. Why not? The important thing would be staring at his own reflection in the river all day long. Unable to wait any longer, the winged lizard casts his transformation ability and feels an invasive and painful reaction taking over his body, twisting and reshaping his limbs into a very questionable form. That is, it looks slightly more human, maybe, but somehow even more grotesque than the previous one, which leaves the poor dragon completely frustrated. As if that weren't enough. As always, the divine voice claims that it cannot reveal information about this at the subject's current level, and he starts losing his composure entirely with all this bizarre stuff happening. He checks his status and sees that his attack and defense have been cut in half, and his mana points are being drained very quickly. Tired of this nonsense, the poor guy returns to his normal draconic form. At the same time, the pair of adventurers sweats to take down a giant spider in the forest. As time passes, the darkness of night begins to take over the surroundings, which makes the dog woman somewhat insecure. The two decide it's better to end the investigation for today, but then they come across a suspicious cave on the way, because inside there were strange statues that probably symbolize a dragon and a human. The dog woman imagines that it might be some kind of shrine belonging to dragon worshippers, but Melcia doesn't think there are any people like that in the village. She observes that these figures are imbued with powerful magic, while her partner uses her sharp sense of smell to detect the scent of strips of meat hanging outside the cave. Given the situation, Melcia decides to investigate inside and finds utensils that could easily belong to a human dwelling. And the cave is incredibly illuminated by glowing mushrooms on the walls. In a huge jar, a large amount of seasoning is stored, the well-known red fruit both women know as piperus. The beast woman thinks about taking some of this rarity home, but the human completely disagrees, since the place looks more like a hideout for bandits, and it's best not to leave any trace behind. Speaking of which, the pair is caught red-handed by Lacerda, who had woken up and was now staring at them like a guard dog. However, the caterpillar seems to give up after turning around and disappearing, while Melcia says that this creature is known as the Princess of Poison, and not without reason. For that reason, the human wants nothing more than to get out of there as fast as possible. In the meantime, outside, the plague dragon is deep in thought until Lacerda alerts him for some reason. In reality, the dragon already knows what it's about, since he saw the two intruders entering the cave, and he expects both of them to be amazed by the first-class dacre he built himself in his humble home. Honestly, he wanted to show up and tell them everything about how he put his little house together, but he quickly comes back to reality and remembers that he's nothing more than a monster, and his presence would cause a massive commotion. Since that's the case, the plague dragon sees no choice but to use his human transformation skill again. After all, considering there are demi-humans in this world like that dog girl, maybe they won't be so shocked and might even interact with him normally. And so, the mini-hero takes on his supposedly human form and gently waves at the women, who respond with pure horror on their faces. Immediately, Melcia shouts for Yuno not to be afraid, so the demi-human stops trembling and lands a direct hammer blow to the dragon's mouth. Right after that, Melcia uses her Lucent Luna skill to twist the enemy for good, recognizing him as a plague dragon. Since she's out of mana points, she calls her partner so they can retreat. The dragon does everything he can to make them wait, but obviously the strategy fails, leaving the poor guy alone once again. Or rather, he still has dear Lacerda by his side, who pats him as a way to console him for failing to make new friends. After running a small marathon without looking back, Melcia and Yuno hit the brakes to catch their breath and analyze the situation to decide what to do from here on. Considering that a earth dragon and a plague dragon live in this forest, There's no way the two of them can walk around safely unless they look for reinforcements. Because the truth is that this place is really dangerous. So the best thing to do is slip away quietly and return with more people. At dawn, the young plague dragon leaves his cave after a good night's sleep. Despite the beating he took just a few hours earlier, he goes to the strips of meat drying on the rack and grabs one for breakfast, feeling like his body has already recovered from yesterday's strange adventure. Ironically, even though the day had been marked by the long-dreamed of human transformation, the truth is that it ended up being a huge mess after all. Now, to make up for the bad trip he went through, the dragon decides to set up a well-planned revenge to cheer himself up again. So he goes to the poison princess and tells her that some stupid monkeys keep wandering around the cave and stealing his food. So it would be good if his partner poisoned the meat outside so the simians could learn the final lesson of their lives, but it has to be a good poison. One with no smell or color that makes it too obvious. Hearing that, Lacerda goes to an empty jar and spits a viscous substance with no scent and no color. With a poison of that quality in his hands, the plague dragon rubs them together while imagining the monkeys dropping dead on the ground. So he soaks the meat outside the cave with that deadly liquid and patiently waits for the wretches to show up. Hours pass until the distracted dragon hears the monkeys screaming near the meat rack. In fact, the mosquitoes had been attracted by the lantern light, and now one of them was drooling and writhing on the ground as its insides turned to mush in a not-so-pretty convulsion. Not wanting to lose the chance, the dragon jumps out of hiding and charges at the remaining monkeys, beating each one of them without mercy. However, despite the initial beating, the trio of monkeys that remained was willing to fight. After all, the dragon is big, but he's not three. Then again, he's not alone either, because the plague dragon calls his caterpillar partner to catch the monkeys off guard with her long-range projectiles, taking them down one by one with heavy fire. But the battle wasn't over yet. Far from it, since they were still alive. The monkeys gathered together to whistle in unison, and the sound coming from them was deafening. Suddenly, a gigantic monkey emerges from the forest, a true brute. A gorilla on steroids, already with his pants metaphorically soiled. The plague dragon checks the rival's status window and discovers that it's a giant orangutan, and not only is it powerful, it also has a skill that strengthens its allies. Knowing he needs to end this quickly, the dragon spits fire in the direction of the alpha monkey. But it's protected by the smaller trio who, somehow acting together, raise a barrier of earth that absorbs the flames. From that moment on, the simians were fully buffed and ready to attack. And they do quickly, showing they're definitely a level above what they were moments before, seriously complicating the dragon's life. When the giant orangutan approaches, Lacerda throws herself at him with a rolling attack, but ends up being captured and hurled against a tree, forcing the dragon to save her at the last moment. Seeing that she's not doing well, the flying lizard sets her on the ground and realizes things are getting ugly. With no idea how to turn this around, he asks the divine voice for an analysis of the giant monkey. The voice says that the giant orangutan is a rank deep creature, an evolved form of the orangutan that leveled up and became the leader after defeating the previous alpha of its troop. Since evolving through battle is sacred for this race that specializes in casting support spells for the group. At that moment, the young plague dragon remembers that the giant orangutan's status window listed a telepathy skill, so maybe there's some way to negotiate with him. With that said, the dragon takes the poison monkey hostage and makes it clear that the little one is going to die if he isn't listened to right now. This makes the alpha monkey contact him through telepathy for a negotiation. So the dragon explains that the young simian will die from the poison unless that black caterpillar produces the antidote, but she will only do that if the orangutans leave them alone. In turn, the enemy leader responds that this duo has become too big of a threat to simply be ignored. So it's better for them to be taken down right now, even if sacrifices are made in the process. The dragon counters that if he goes all in against the opponents, no one will be left alive to tell the story. So the orangutan leader teaches the highest path of his clan, discard the weak and let them die. To prove he's not bluffing, he says he killed his own ancestor to ascend to the throne. Seeing that this negotiation is going nowhere, the plague dragon takes advantage of the orangutan's beliefs to challenge their alpha to a duel. In the orangutan's world, duels only occur in disputes between clans or when an alpha is surpassed. In this case, the duel would involve a new species. But the monkey believes that won't be a problem considering the real dispute between him and the plague dragon. Thus, the orangutan accepts the challenge, since this dispute, according to their tradition, is a sacred ritual. With everything decided, Lacerda removes the venom from the infected monkey and saves him from death. But she herself is suddenly captured by the monkeys. According to them, it's to ensure that the caterpillar respects the rules of the duel, but she will be released as soon as everything is over. Then, the two rivals are placed face to face, and the young plague dragon thinks it was a good move to put himself in a one-on-one against the enemy leader. But even so, this guy is full of buffs and won't be easy. The fight begins when the orangutan jumps and punches the dragon, who protects himself using his arms. A second punch throws him far away, but doesn't cause any considerable damage. The third tosses the lizard once again several yards away, so he decides to gain distance from the opponent with his roll. Feeling insulted by the opponent's escape, the giant orangutan runs after him furiously, until the dragon turns halfway around and attacks by surprise with a powerful tail strike that throws the monkey off balance, opening his guard and allowing a series of consecutive blows, causing a confusion debuff on the orangutan. The dragon tries to seize the opportunity to finish things, but the monkey ignites from so much fury and burns an absurd amount of MP on agility, giving him unstoppable speed. From that point on, the plague dragon starts taking a beating like never before. But even so, when he manages to get a bit of distance, he tries to get into the enemy's mind by puffing out his chest and calling him a coward for not charging in. Having taken the bait, the orangutan rushes at the opponent, and the dragon does the same. So the two begin a solid brawl that makes the forest shake. After a long traded sequence, the two look like they were run over by a tractor. At the limit of his physical stamina, the mini-hero manages to land a dragon punch on the rival, thus evolving the strike to level 3, which makes him think this declared his victory. However, the orangutan returns a solid punch to his chin, giving him a blue screen. Even so, as he slowly blacks out, the winged monster evolves from level 37 to 39, gaining the title of Clan Chief. When he wakes up, the dragon slowly realizes that not only is his trusted partner safe and sound, but he's somehow back in his usual cave, his home, and, for some unknown reason, he has even leveled up. Because of how strange the situation is, all he can do is try to guess why he ended up back here, and probably because he took a solid punch. He even considers the possibility that the caterpillar was the one who brought him back. But thinking more clearly, it's obvious she would never have the strength to carry a giant brute like him. That's when the dragon looks ahead and notices 4 orangutans standing there with an oddly cheerful posture, as if they were revering him. The mini-hero, however, isn't inclined to interpret this supposed intrusion in a positive way, so he assumes the monkeys came to avenge their leader. But after thinking more calmly about their behavior, it becomes obvious that these guys are treating the plague dragon as their real boss, whatever the reason may be. With that in mind, the lizard checks his status and confirms what he suspected: a clan chief title, which can only mean one thing: he defeated the monkeys' alpha. And now they consider him their new leader. The poison princess is already making it clear she doesn't trust these people. But her friend sees this as a great opportunity to use some extra manpower to improve his home and take care of the most annoying tasks. When he leaves the cave, the big leader finds a mountain of fruit waiting for him, all brought by his loyal subordinates. Pleased with their initiative, the mini-hero allows the orangutans to eat the meat that had been drying outside. Speaking of which, since everything was devoured thanks to the crew's endless hunger, they now need to get more dried meat for their stock. Later on, the dragon cooks in a jar and notices one of the monkeys watching him with curiosity. Since the little guy seems hungry and interested in the process, this feels like a good moment to teach him how to cook on his own. That way, the big guy won't have to do it anymore and, with time, might even just relax at home with his feet up. So the chief teaches the orangutan the steps in the kitchen, first slicing the meat, then placing it in a jar and seasoning it, then mixing the seasoning well with the food, and finally letting it rest. After showing the step-by-step process, the dragon is satisfied with his teaching ability, but something definitely feels wrong. And indeed, Poison Princess Lacerda is nothing but pure fury, not even trying to hide it as she parades her anger around the cave without explanation. Setting that aside, the mini-hero plans to put the orangutans in charge of the dried meat, but he starts to worry that he'll have nothing left to do if every task ends up in the monkey's hands. Also, now that there are 4 extra cave companions, it's obvious they'll need more stored food, which could turn into another headache. Either way, first and foremost, they need more jars to store food, and that's exactly what the dragon goes outside to make. Once he's out there, another monkey seems quite intrigued by how the lizard molds clay, so he gives him a chance to learn, and looking at the animal's status, one of his skills is literally called Nimble, which suggests they already have technique for this sort of thing, not to mention their long, slender primate fingers, meaning it's much easier for them to work with pottery. So after finishing the jar he was making and showing the orangurang each step, he leaves the next pot in the monkey's hands and steps outside for some fresh air. There, he finds the poison princess hitting a lump of clay randomly, which makes it clear she's interested in pottery too, especially considering how embarrassed she gets when she realizes she was seen doing it. Next, the plague dragon gives 2 orangurangs tools made from Barroso clay, extremely sturdy hammers that the workers will use to break down the walls and expand the cave. At the same time, with every interaction her friend has with these outsiders, Lacerda becomes more visibly irritated. Meanwhile, in a tavern in the village, Yuno and Melcha wait for the rest of their companions Daz and Romina, who have likely already received the summons but must be finishing some job before coming. Speaking of work, the beast girl remembers with a bit of fear the plague dragon they encountered in that isolated cave in the forest, and the human knows well that this is yet another sign that the place is going through a complicated situation, one they need to understand better before it gets worse. On the other hand, if there's anyone who feels like things are improving, ironically, it's the plague dragon himself. At dawn the next day, he's woken up in a rush by Lacerda and starts thinking there's an intruder inside the cave. But the real danger had been inside the house the whole time. Or rather, it wasn't even dangerous, it was just the orangurangs sleeping while clinging to their chief as if he were a tree full of branches, completely preventing him from moving. After a few attempts to escape, the chief gives up and goes back to sleep, leaving the caterpillar furious. Moments later, the 4 monkeys stand up, but only to help one of them, who is mortally poisoned and has just seconds left to live. The dragon immediately looks at Lacerda, and the tiny girl doesn't bother hiding the satisfaction on her face as she sends the poor creature to its grave. After convincing her to apply the antidote, the plague dragon begins to understand that she's frustrated for not receiving as much attention as before, almost like an older sibling upset about the newborn stealing the spotlight. So, to fix the situation, the head of the house suggests going on a hunt to make her happy. Meanwhile, at the village border near the forest, Myria can no longer bear the anxiety of waiting for Daz's return. Days have passed since the adventurers set out to look for him, but nothing new has been discovered so far, which leaves the woman increasingly distressed and unwilling to accept the situation. Eventually, she decides, once and for all, to resume the search for her former companion herself. Back to the plague dragon. He's happily thinking about how he's just 1 level away from evolving again. Today is the day he'll finally manage it, and he's excited to see how strong he'll become next, especially now that this strength is important to help keep the cave functioning with more people living there. On the other hand, Lacerda doesn't seem happy at all, despite her partner's effort. It's probably because the orangurangs were invited to the hunt, and they're far from intelligent, constantly hitting each other with Barroso's tools. The dragon wanted to see how those guys handled themselves in a battle situation, and it would also speed up the XP farming he needed to evolve. But Lacerda didn't want to hear any of it and simply walked ahead. Her companion tried calling her, but the fact that they don't speak the same language remains an obstacle. Suddenly, Lacerda senses creatures lurking nearby. Sure enough, 2 large forest wolves appear, and the plague dragon sees a great opportunity to warm up for the rest of the day. However, the orangurangs charge straight at the wolves and slam their hammers into them, and this interference becomes the last straw for Lacerda, who now decides to leave for good. During all this, Myria still has no luck and can't find a single clue about her former teammate. She ventured into a dangerous area of the forest and knows she needs to go back. But the sudden appearance of a figure resembling Daz grabs her full attention. It looked like a zombified version of the man, but overwhelmed by anxiety and guilt over his disappearance, Myria didn't think straight and got too close. Then mysterious beings reveal the glow of their eyes in the darkness of the forest. Nearby, the plague dragon tries apologizing to the poison princess, but seeing that there's no point in trying to justify the orangurang's presence, he suggests a hunt with just the 2 of them, no one else. From her affectionate reaction, it becomes clear what the little caterpillar thinks of that invitation. With her kindness restored, the dragon takes the chance to make it clear that his friend is the most important thing in his life, and that this will not change. However, a woman's scream echoes in the distance, and the mini-hero immediately recognizes Myria's voice. She is definitely in danger somewhere close. Desperate to help her, he hesitates only to wonder whether there might be other humans with her. If so, he could end up suffering at their hands again, as usually happens. Even so, the dragon pushes past his fear and races toward the girl using his extremely fast roll. Although he told the poison princess to stay behind, she refuses and follows him. The mini-hero speeds up to try shaking her off, afraid she might get hurt in a potential fight. But what hurts her instead is a head-on collision with a rock on the path. Unable to control her speed and direction, Lacerda hits the stone straight on. Her friend rushes to help her, but upon seeing that she still has plenty of HP, he decides to prioritize Myria and resumes his pursuit. Before he leaves, Lacerda grabs onto his tail, making him hesitate for a moment. But since the human might be in serious danger, he sticks to his decision. His mini-hero level rises from 2 to 3, and his malefactor level from 3 to 4. Ignoring all that, the plague dragon continues rolling at full speed. Meanwhile, Myria is being surrounded more and more by canine creatures that don't look friendly at all. As one of them gets close enough to pounce on her, the mini-hero arrives just in time to knock the predator away, placing himself in front of the human to protect her. The dragon analyzes the enemies using the divine voice and discovers he's facing a group of Mahawolf's lower rank D wolves that use a third eye on their foreheads to share their vision with the rest of the pack, making them excellent group hunters, expecting more of them to arrive because of that annoying ability. The dragon tries checking their stats, but is blocked due to his low level. To make things worse, their status windows were trembling in a bizarre way, which leaves the winged lizard deeply worried. Regardless, the fight begins in full when the pack attacks together. The dragon knocks down the one in front with baby breath and crushes the other two with a precise body blow. From behind him, Myria watches with a mix of fear and admiration at that imposing and unpredictable figure who was, in truth, just a somewhat silly little guy who desperately wanted to be friends with her. On the other hand, the plague dragon ends up releasing a bit of poisonous dust when he flaps his wings during the fight. Though it seems she is fine, he even tries to check on her by approaching with one paw raised toward her. But Myria reacts with genuine fear and tells him to back away, something that sincerely hurts the poor thing's feelings, as he still hasn't realized how threatening he looks. As usual, the divine voice announces that the monster has gained enough points to evolve into his next form, and all of this happens with Myria watching him without looking away. She didn't understand why the creature was having such a bizarre episode, but somehow, maybe because of the way he moved, she remembered that baby dragon who once protected her. With that spark of memory in mind, she stands up and tries communicating with the creature, as if she belonged to the same species. The dragon realizes she is trying to imitate the way he once tried greeting the group of adventurers, and so, the two fall into a strange but effective rhythm, enough to understand that there was, in fact, some kind of connection between them. However, their communication is interrupted by the arrival of several Mahawolfs. The plague dragon places himself in front of Myria once again to protect her. But instead of facing the beasts, this time he puts the girl on his back and runs away with her as fast as he can. Sometime later, with Marielle's help, villagers are searching for Myria. Gregory offers to look in the depths of the forest, but the elder insists on doing it alone. At the same time, Melsha and Yuno's group gathers near Noah Forest to confront the plague dragon. But before restarting the investigation, they must find the client in the village to obtain permission to use the full team. Meanwhile, the plague dragon maintains his run at a strong enough pace, but he himself begins to wonder how long he can endure it, since those wolves have enviable stamina. Changing his strategy, once he reaches terrain favorable to his tactic, he stops running, turns toward the monsters, and fires a blast of flames, knocking most of them down. With only one left, he finishes the job with his claws. To be honest, the dragon doesn't understand why these wolves didn't try to retreat. At that moment, the divine voice reveals that the player has reached the maximum level and cannot gain experience points until he evolves, which he states he is already well aware of and with no patience whatsoever. When the dragon leaves, the eye of one of the dead wolves releases a blue substance. After saving Myria and continuing his run, the mini-hero doesn't know exactly what to do, because simply returning the woman to the village might cause the usual confusion brought by his monstrous presence, the same place where he suffered several attacks that almost cost him his life. The lizard wonders, to begin with, why on earth Myria was in the middle of the forest, since there is no chance she doesn't know how dangerous it is. Speaking of which, he regrets not being able to ask her directly, which would be a big help. But since that's impossible, the idea is to leave the girl somewhere safe around the village. Suddenly, Myria hugs the dragon and says something, and he could swear that this time he understood, as if he could feel that she was thanking him. However, as usual, the divine voice ruins the good moment by offering the player the evolution tree, since he still needs to evolve if he wants to continue leveling up. Since the path is long, the flying lizard proceeds and notices that there are 4 options. But for some reason, none of them is a natural evolution of the plague dragon, which is his current race. In any case, he wouldn't want to continue down that path anyway, since Myria might never be able to ride on his back again if he evolved into a hideous creature that releases poison from every hole in its body. Be that as it may, the divine voice explains the available alternatives. The first is the Dark Draco-Human, a lower-level Draco-Human, categorized as a semi-human, with black scales all over its body. For a moment, the player thinks that, in the end, this would still be a human, but thinking better, it's too good to be true. It would be naive to assume the villagers would accept such an ugly creature. Next, we have the Rolling Dragon, a specialist in speed instead of strength, the fastest of its species. The player imagines that this thing just rolls around all day long, as the name makes very clear. Third, the Little Arc Dragon, a light-type dragon with high intelligence and a user of white magic. For the first time, the Plague Dragon feels he has an appealing option. Because although small dragons have fewer evolution paths, he would love to use white magic, and he would probably have a good size to serve as Myria's mount. Lastly, the divine voice offers Jormungand, whose body resembles that of a giant snake, with scales covered in substances containing a fatal poison. Any terrain this creature passes through becomes barren. Obviously, the player discards this possibility immediately, since he would certainly become human society's #1 enemy if he turned into that radioactive thing. In the end, while frying his brain trying to decide what to become, the plague dragon sees Myria pointing to a small river, so he stops so she can drink water and clean herself. Taking advantage of the break, he sits for a moment to think about the alternatives, and, after discarding Jormungand, he becomes interested in the Rolling Dragon because, ever since he arrived in this world, if there's one thing he's been doing, it's rolling around everywhere. But on second thought, the idea of turning into a scale-covered armadillo isn't very attractive. Another option would be the Little Arc Dragon, which seems to be the best type for getting along with humans. But if we consider that the Draco-Human is a semi-human, that last alternative might be even better for trying to fit in with the villagers. On one hand, he wonders how Myria would see him if he transformed into that race. But on the other, he also thinks about how monsters would start treating him, especially Lacerda, who might not take this new phase of his very well. Confused in his thoughts, the mini-hero gets a huge scare when Myria walks up behind him, trying to understand what is happening with this lost and dramatic being, who only needs to decide the future of his human life, or rather, his dragon life, as bitter and alluring as a craft beer. As if Myria could understand him, the miscreant asks which option she thinks is best, because although he knows she doesn't understand, he really wants her advice for this cruel dilemma. Trying to understand the creature's nonverbal signals, Myria uses a roaring gesture to make it clear she is referring to the plague dragon. So after some insistence, the lizard manages to understand when the human says his name. From that moment on, even if it wasn't complete or complex communication, it was enough for these two very different beings to understand each other. And this ability made the Greek language skill rise from level 2 to level 3. After hours of practice, it became easier for the dragon to understand what the woman was saying. And at a certain point in the dialogue, she said she was searching for a companion who got lost in the forest, the same forest she went into so many times without the permission of the village elder, Marielle. Thinking she's looking for those girls who went into the cave, the dragon tries to gesture that to her, but he can't manage it. In truth, thanks to his language skill, he can understand everything she says, but he can't speak a single word. Even so, on his next attempt he eventually manages to get the message across, and Myria explains that she's not after those adventurers, but rather a colleague named Das. The lizard remembers that name, but he also recalls that this man was killed by that little stone dragon. To show that he knows who Myria is talking about, the plague dragon puts some grass on his head to imitate long hair, and the fact that he knows the man makes her understand that he is the same dragon who saved her that other time, earning the monster a warm, affectionate hug as a reward. A hug that practically made the young dragon apologize to Lacerda and decide he would become a Draco-Human. During that moment, Myria asks whether the monster has a name, and that really leaves him puzzled. because he had never actually thought about it. The truth is that the poor creature is nameless even now. When he shakes his head, the human asks if she can think of one for him, and nothing could make the dragon happier. So the woman thinks about a good name to call this being from now on, remembering all the moments in which he acted with great courage and heroism, because that was certainly what stood out to her most during the short time they've known each other. With those memories of his bravery in mind, Myria suggests he be called Illusia, which is the name of a flower she likes. Moved by receiving this name, the monster imagines that someday he wants to see this flower for himself. The divine voice asks if he will confirm the name, because once chosen, it can never be changed. For a moment, the dragon hesitates, since he won't be able to change it later, but because it was Myria who chose the word, he goes ahead and decides he will be called Illusia forever, which brings the creature enormous happiness. However, the moment of joy is ruined when heavy footsteps are heard nearby. Quickly, knowing exactly which creature is capable of stepping that hard, Illusia lowers his body to show Myria she should climb onto his back, and once she does, he runs far away with her. Confused by this enemy's appearance since its lair is far from there, the plague dragon lets that thought go and runs toward the village, where he plans to leave his friend in a safe place and then look for Dawes on his own. Along the way, the pair is surprised by a group of Mahawolves chasing them. These wolves possess a skill called magical energy reception, which suggests they are being controlled by someone or something. Indeed, Illusia soon discovers the theory is correct when suddenly, riding atop a huge brown Mahawolf, appears none other than Dawes himself, or at least something that resembles a person. Considering the man's appearance is far from good, Illusia tries to check the man's status, but his list of skills is completely empty and blurred. Without wasting time, Dawes attacks with his wolf, forcing the plague dragon to defend himself as best he can. Myria tries to beg her old friend to stop, but since he can't hear her, she reacts with a fireball, which Dawes blocks with his sword. Taking advantage of the opening, Illusia manages to knock the opponent off the wolf, and for some reason the man clings to a clump of dirt that fell with him, like Smeagol admiring the One Ring. Whatever the case, Dawes and his ferocious wolves are eager to tear a piece out of their opponents, and as if that weren't enough, those heavy and powerful steps keep getting closer. Even Myria begins to suspect she knows who those violent footsteps belong to. Thinking more carefully about what Dawes is carrying, there is only one possible meaning. In the middle of all this, Dawes mounts another Mahawolf and speeds off toward the village, while Myria concludes he must be carrying a stone dragon egg to lure the giant dragon to the village, so she and Illusia must return the egg to its owner before a tragedy occurs. The woman quickly climbs onto the plague dragon again, and while he runs in the direction Dawes went, Illusia tries to understand whether Dawes is trying to get revenge on his community somehow, and why on earth the man is riding wild creatures like Mahawolves. With the other wolves chasing them, Illusia knows he cannot increase his speed with his friend on his back, but Myria realizes this herself and asks to be left behind so Illusia can chase Dawes. Illusia hates the idea, but Myria says she can hold off the wolves and begs the dragon to save her village. Since that's how it must be, even against his will, the dragon sets the human down. For some reason, though, he stays completely still with his back exposed, giving the brown Mahawolf full freedom to sink its fangs into him. Filled with rage, Illusia punches the wolf so hard that it flies into the air. Then the lizard jumps up after it to use his nutcracker skill with a strength and intensity never seen before, finishing the beast without mercy. Next, the other Mahawolves rush toward Myria at high speed, but Illusia is so furious that his speed easily surpasses theirs. Even so, one of the wolves manages to slash Myria's shoulder with its claws. After defeating all the opponents, Illusia runs to help his friend, but she once again begs him to save the village above anything else. Still, he cannot leave her behind, so he decides to head to the village with her on his back. Some time later, as the sun begins to set in the village near Noah Forest, Gregory sends the children home because night is approaching. Not far from there, the little stone dragon lets out a loud roar, instantly putting Gregory on alert. Being farther from the source of the sound, Marielle thinks she heard something, but she isn't sure. Deep in the forest, with night soon approaching, the elf knows she needs to find Myria as quickly as possible. At the same time, in another part of Noah, a group of adventurers moves through the woods in search of their own objective. Near the earth dragon, that blue substance that came out of a Mahawolf's eye has now grown much larger and seems to have a life of its own, even though it doesn't have a defined shape. As all the factions and everyone involved in this fight move within the same territory, The tendency is for all of them to clash at some point, and when that happens, that's when things will really start to heat up. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.